Okay, and we are recording. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for our next installment in the virtual CQM training series for the Dallas EMA and HSDA. I am Michael Hager. I'm one of the consultants contracted by the EMA and HSDA Administrative Agency for Clinical Quality Management, and I'm joined by my colleague, Jamie Schenk. And so we're going to be walking through this presentation today on QI principles and methods. All right, so I'm covering for Oscar here since he is still joining us. Just a quick reminder that all of these trainings are being saved in our YouTube channel, and you should be able to just click the link, not on the slides today, but on the slides that you get in the in Glass Cubes. And of course, if you haven't joined Glass Cubes yet, you can email Regina and she'll be able to add you. All the toolkits that we have for each of these individual trainings are saved in Glass Cubes. There's a lot of great content that you might be missing if you're not part of Glass Cubes yet. For those of you who pre-registered, you'll be getting an email after today's webinar that includes the toolkit. So I did not send it out in advance. I apologize for that today, but you'll be getting it after the fact. So again, just a reminder that if you don't know what Glass Cubes is, you're like, what? What is he talking about? Just email Regina and she'll be able to make sure that you're added to the Glass Cubes or answer any of your questions. All right, I will turn it over to Regina to go through our Zoom hints. Regina?
Righty. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being with us as Michael shared with you. For our Zoom meetings, we would like for you to understand just a few hints there. In order to escape to exit the full screen, all you have to do is press your escape button. If you'd like to change the view options, you have a change view options at the top of your screen. And then we would advise or actually suggest that you place yourself on mute until you're ready to either ask a question or to interject into the conversation. We also have a chat feature. So if you'd like to go ahead and enter your name in the chat room this morning, so we'll know who is all here. And then also, we would also, this meeting will be recorded and for sharing at a later date. Next slide, please. So there is Oscar sharing with us where our mute button is. Then we have Angie sharing where you can stop your video from being shown. And then we have, oh, sorry, good morning. Jamie there is showing you exactly where the chat feature is. And Oscar again showing you where, if you see, slow down a little bit. There we are. There's your changing of the view. So however you would like to view the slides this morning. All right. And next it will be Angie. And well, actually there's the whole team. And it's moving a little slow. And so
thank you.
There you are, Angie.
Yes, I'm here. So good morning, everyone. We're just going to go over just a second to talk about the name tagging. So once you join the session, we will rename you by adding your agency name. And this is going to allow us to assign you to the appropriate breakout session. If you want to add additional information, for example, your pronouns, feel free to do so, but just be sure you don't erase your agency name. If you just get disconnected for some reason and you have to rejoin and you don't see your agency name beside your name, we will add it back for you. Next slide, please. And then a little about the breakout room process. Everyone's going to be tagged according to their group. Each participant will receive an invitation that looks like the image to the right of your screen. And it's going to join you, an invitation is going to ask you to join the breakout room. So once you accept that invitation by clicking join, you'll be moved into your breakout. And then when the time is up, you'll be notified and then asked to rejoin the main room. Okay, Michael, we're ready for you. And you're muted, Michael.
All right. Yeah, that's very typical of me. I'm like, blah, blah, blah. All right. So some learning objectives for today. We want you to be able to walk away from today's webinar naming 3 major QI methodologies in use in healthcare. And we want you to be able to explain the difference between operational, system, and clinical quality. There is a piece on the model for improvement we'd like for you to be able to describe when you walk away from today. Being able to describe the CQM Organizational Assessment and how it fits into quality projects. And then finally, the phases of a QI project lifecycle we'd like for you to be able to name following today's webinar. There's going to be a lot of content, but these are the main points that we'd like you to walk away with today. And the toolkit has a lot of amazing materials that supports all of the extra content as well. So we're trying to continue with our learning in a way that allows for people who are more advanced to have something, and for people who are beginners to have something as well, since we do have quite a range among you in the subrecipients. In the toolkit that you'll see later, we have the Institute for Healthcare Improvement Model for Improvement landing page. So that gives a really great sense of the different resources that are available through the Institute for Healthcare Improvement as it relates for the model for improvement. The Agency for Health Research and Quality has a practice facilitation guide for the model for improvement as well. So it's a slightly different way to think about how to do model for improvement, more from a program or project lead standpoint. So most of you are involved in quality in your sites, and so you might feel sometimes like you're an island. So this is a guide that helps you to think about how you can work with other people in your teams and really be a quality leader in your own agency. We have the Agency for Health Research and Quality Lean landing page, since we know that some of you are really interested in Lean as well. We're going to be focused a lot today on the model for improvement, but we did want you to be aware that there are resources available for other methodologies. Along those lines, we have the American Society for Quality articles on time, which is another method that has more of an operational focus for those of you who are interested in quality culture and operations. And we also have American Society for Quality articles on general QI principles that you might find interesting as it relates to statistics and how you kind of select different QI methodologies. And then finally, we have an example that is a article that's drawn from the literature that looks at Project Echo QI project example. This toolkit is really intended to give you a good sense of what is out there as far as the QI methods and how they are talked about by these huge TA and resource centers that we have in our country and internationally. And also to give you that example as well. And of course, we're going to be talking about examples as we walk our way through this presentation too. All right. I will go ahead and open our poll here. All right. So we have a couple of questions just to get us started. And like usual, we just want to ease you into the water. And we're trying to get a good sense of where you're at, just like all of our other webinars. So our questions are, my agency has an HIV-focused QI project in place. My agency is highly skilled in generating and evaluating QI projects. And the final question is, it sometimes feels like my agency has too many QI initiatives running at the same time. So I'm just going to leave a moment for you all to answer. We have about, I'll just leave a moment for you to answer. Go ahead. All right, so the answers are coming in. Oh, hey, Oscar.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Just having a Monday morning.
We don't know anything about that.
Exactly. I don't think anybody can correlate with Monday's morning. spa drain to the ground, and beautiful morning, beautiful day. Awesome, nothing can ruin that.
All right, sir. So I have the poll running. As you can see, I'm going to just end the poll and let's see, share the results.
Excellent, excellent.
So we can see that most people have an HIV-focused QI project in place. One person said that they weren't sure. We have about half of folks feeling that their agency is highly skilled in QI projects, and about a third of folks saying no, they're not highly skilled, and about a fifth of folks saying that they're not sure. And then when we think about how many QI initiatives running at the same time, we have a good split in terms of the yes, no. And I think this is really interesting because the work that I do across the country, this is a common problem. And we're going to talk about some of these problems that we have in QI projects in the field as we work our way through today's webinar. So thank you so much for participating in that poll. And we are going to move on.
Michael.
Yes, sir.
Michael, there's something interesting in this question number 2. Like, you add them up. If someone say no, 31% said no, but 23 say I don't know, that means can be grouped into the no as well. Because if you're not sure, this is not it's a no totally, but you need guidance on that. So we can group on. If you group them on, add them up, it's more than half of the participant here is telling us like, okay, we need help. So that's great. Thanks for joining us, Guy.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for pointing that out, Oscar. All right. So we are going to walk our way through some quality improvement methods now, and to give you an overview, I hope, around the possibilities that we have when it comes to QI methods. So in terms of thinking about the types of methods that we have available to us, there's so many. And we can think about this from an operational focus. So this is thinking about system quality, and this is about thinking about operational quality. And usually operational focus is focused on the operations or the system, right? And while performance is really important because it's a critical aspect, it's secondary to the operational focus. So in operational focus, we have some that are tied to strategic processes, such as the CQM Organizational Assessment and the Baldrige Award. And we have a toolkit piece on this that kind of compares some of these strategic processes that you can use. In addition to strategic processes, we have some that are tied to excellence in quality culture management. So that's what TIME is. TIME is a relatively new methodology, but it's the idea that if you don't have good knowledge transfer, if you don't have a good sense of capacity building, if you don't have a good written process to help identify what is actually happening on the ground in the field, then it's something that is an opportunity for improvement or a risk for poor performance. So again, the operational focus is really tied on the system or the process, with performance coming secondary. For performance focus, it's the opposite. We look at performance first and foremost, but these other items are secondary when it comes to strategic process and when it comes to culture. For the most part, we have our performance focus for the model for improvement tied to endpoint outcomes. So we're looking at improving viral suppression. We're looking at improving retention. We're looking at improving PAPs versus Lean and Six Sigma, which are tied to eliminating waste. And so there, the performance that is most important to focus on is waste. And so waste is defined in different ways, depending on whether you're looking at Lean or Six Sigma. In Lean, waste is defined as anything that does not add extreme value to the customer, right? So in Lean, people living with HIV are the most important thing to focus on, and their experience is the most important thing to maximize and enhance. Whereas in Six Sigma defines waste as defects. So if we're supposed to be, providing X number of screenings, how many of those screenings were done in a way that led to a, valid result versus how many of those screenings were conducted that were kind of done in a way that led to questionable results that are hardly actionable from a clinical standpoint. So when we have a performance focus project, it is much more clinical. It can be process-based if it's looking at waste, but for the most part, it's still clinical because we're looking at deriving excellent experience or eliminating defect waste. So I'm staying on this slide for a long time because I really want to emphasize that while there are certain things that are really excellent about operational focus projects, in Ryan White, we're really focused on performance because if we remember PCN 1502, which we're going to dive back into in a moment, everything was focused on improving endpoint outcomes, right? So that means that we really need to have our primary QI methodology that we have in place needs to be something that's either like a model for improvement or a lean or a Six Sigma. And of course, we use the organizational assessment in our work in Ryan White, but it's used as a way to help add to the work that we're doing in model for improvement, lean, Six Sigma, or some other performance base. So I wanted to show this slide because to delineate between the two types. But I also wanted to say that there is extreme value to doing multiple, right? So we have a performance piece and a process piece. The process piece supports and adds to our ability to be excellent in the performance piece. So some recipes for success include robust stakeholder involvement in the QI project team. The QI project team is a group that is focused on the actual QI project or initiative and is usually made up of some of the same people who are on your quality management committee, but also involves people outside of your quality management committee. Mostly because your quality management committee is a cross-section of all the different areas that you do in your agency, but the QI project team is going to be focused on a very specific kernel of activity or service that you provide. So it's really important to think about how the QI project team needs to be inclusive of all the different folks who have a hand on the process or the outcome that you're trying to affect in your quality improvement project. Communication of progress and sticking points beyond the QI project team is really important. So sharing out with the rest of your stakeholders, particularly your staff, who are the most important people, is really important. And it's really important as well to share not only the good stuff, but also the stuff that's a challenge. You know, those sticking points are very important because sometimes when you put this in, say, a organizational newsletter, or if you have an internal system for communication, or like a morning circular or morning rounds, there are really great opportunities for you to briefly share information to update folks more broadly about the progress of your QI project. In doing so, you end up inspiring them and kind of turning on their light bulbs and engaging them in a way that they otherwise wouldn't be engaged in. Another recipe for success is strategic alignment of project aims with organizational vision and mission. And you can see my little diagram here in the upper right corner. This is really important because all of our organizations have a vision and mission. All of our organizations have values. And it's really important for us to make sure that whatever QI project we pursue is in alignment with those values, because otherwise, from a strategic standpoint, your organization ends up kind of in this wonky place. And it should be really easy to tie your QI project aims to your quality statement, to your organizational vision. That's just something that really helps people to understand why we're doing this one particular activity versus all the other particular activities that you might be pursuing. So here are some challenges that we have in QI projects. So remediation for low performance is actually quality assurance, and it's not quality improvement. If you have low performance that you're trying to make sure that you're meeting a minimum standard that's set by an expectation, then it's important to remember that that's actually not quality improvement as much quality assurance from the standpoint of Ryan White. Addressing monitoring site visits is compliance and not QI. So that's another common mistake that people make, is that in order to make sure that you can make up for poor site visit findings, we're going to end up having a QI project. That's not QI. So that's another common mistake that we should avoid. Another one is the inability to resist the urge to constantly run around and put out the next fire. So I'm doing a QI project. I feel it's gotten good enough, I guess, because my boss is telling me that I have to now focus on something else, right? And instead of there being, you know, a really thoughtful process to identify what possible projects we could pursue, it's basically just kind of constantly running around. So that's really challenging too. And it's hard to resist the urge, because there's a reason why we call it a fire that needs to be put out. Like, you feel the heat, right? And like sometimes your supervisors might burn you a little bit on what they consider to be slow action or, you know, immobility. And it's really important to think about the, you know, process of planning and the thoughtfulness that goes into QI projects. And then finally, never-ending projects and/or confusion how to sustain gains. This is one of the biggest problems. Actually, one of my colleagues and my mentor, Lori DiLorenzo, has a picture of Falcor, and she goes, "The never-ending project." But like, it's true, right? Like, we have a reason why we're pursuing certain projects, and we're passionate about this issue, and we want to make sure that it goes on forever. And unfortunately, that sometimes means that we're going to be focused on something when our attention and our energy and resources will be better focused on something else. So I hope that this is helpful, you know, in terms of thinking about some successes and challenges that we have in the implementation of QI projects more globally. And I'm sure that some of this has resonated with you in terms of your own experiences in the field. So now let's focus on PCN 1502 again, as promised. So again, as a reminder, and I know we've already covered this, but it's really important to rehash. Subrecipient level QI projects are required, and you're required to use a standard QI methodology. The Dallas EMA and HSDA has selected the model for improvement as its preferred methodology. And as we know, the model for improvement is the one that's actually most commonly in place across the American healthcare infrastructure. The organizational assessment supplements the model for improvement and is critical to overall program and system evaluation. So again, thinking about the model for improvement is our primary method, and we're going to use the organizational assessment as a way to make sure that we're constantly supporting our efforts in doing the model for improvement well, in addition to other things, of course. But, you know, from a QI project standpoint, the organizational assessment has components that focus on QI projects, right? And the way that we use data and whatnot to inform those QI projects. So the organizational assessment and thinking about the process quality is important to support our activities in the model for improvement. So next, subrecipients are required to implement quality improvement activities that are aligned with all the recipients' QI activities. So that means participating in training and other group learning, QI projects related to the network wide project, and things like that. And it'll become clear to you, hopefully, as we continue forward in the series and beyond, what that means and what that looks like. We will be providing a teaser for our upcoming EMA and HSD-wide project coming later in these slides. Where's my mouse? There it is. All right, so again, I emphasize this in the recipes for success and challenges. And this is also a repeat from July 6th, but again, it's so important to reemphasize that quality assurance is not quality improvement. Quality assurance refers to a spectrum of activities aimed at ensuring compliance with minimum quality standards. It includes the retrospective process of measuring compliance with standards, and it's part of the larger administrative function. Whereas quality improvement is looking at improving beyond minimum standards and is beyond compliance, it's about enhancement. So really, really, really important to think about that. And again, just this side-by-side comparison of how something is quality assurance versus quality improvement. So measuring compliance with standards versus continuously improving those standards beyond their minimum current state. Quality assurance is focused on bad apples, whereas quality improvement focuses on health systems and processes. Quality assurance is the responsibility of a few versus quality improvement, which is the responsibility of all. All right, so Jamie, I've been talking and talking and talking and talking. I'm wondering if I can turn it over to you to talk a little bit more about some of these methods.
Yeah, super excited. This is like one of my favorite topics in the whole umbrella of QI and quality management. We did have a question from the chat that was kind of talking about maybe delineating specifically between different site visits. So I think some of that stuff did come up in the last 2 slides, but I don't know if we want to address that question before we jump into the different models.
Sure. Thanks so much for bringing that up, Jamie. Whoever asked a question, would you like to unmute and ask your question on the air?
Hey, Michael, it's Karen Pettis. I think I got it now. How you doing on this happy Monday? No, I understand it now. I've always perceived the Germain Solutions state audit of standards of care to be very heavily laced with a quality perspective. So your slide that you went over just now clarified it for me. So we're good.
Oh, fabulous. Great. Keep those questions coming as they work, as they come up for you. And we will have a session on how the Part A, the EMA, or the EMA and HSDA will be doing monitoring and evaluation for quality. And I hope that that will help in that session where we're going to get really in the weeds on that. But it's such an important point, and I'm so glad that you raised it.
I have an observation on that, Michael. It's important to just highlight the fact that every time that you see something that coming on, it's the word quality, it doesn't mean it's quality related with the CQM activity or improvement project, but it's a very common thing happening in our office. Every time something has the word quality, belongs to us, even though it has no connection with what we're doing. So it's just a matter to observe what the quality implies in all levels. All levels have to do with quality, but not with the quality of the CQM that we are explaining here.
Yeah, great point, Oscar. Thanks so much for that. The QA versus QI thing is something that constantly rears its head. And so taking that step back is so important.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, great. So let's hop into the model for improvement, and feel free to use the chat. I know earlier the poll kind of talked about agency level of activity with an HIV specific QI project and sort of like people's assessment of, skill level. But I'm curious how familiar folks are with the model for improvement, namely, how familiar are you with the PDSA, the plan, do, study cycle, but then also how familiar are you with the 3 questions that we see at the top? Because in my experience, sometimes folks want to skip over those 3 questions, or they think about the model for improvement and it's a little disjointed, but there's essentially 3 strategic questions that are then followed by the PDSA cycles. And there's a relationship between those 2 components, because the PDA cycles very often inform and then help you kind of modify how you answered those 3 strategic questions. So it's kind of this continuous relationship, which is an interesting space. So you really want to think about the 2 pieces together, the questions plus the PDSA cycles, and that's going to encapsulate everything that's part of a QI project lifecycle. You ask, the quality team, the quality group. This is, again, not the responsibility of one person. This is the collective responsibility of all. So you ask, what are we trying to accomplish here? That's where you can establish your aim statement. You can set, kind of your SMART goals, something that's timely, something that's measurable. How do we know change is an improvement? This is part of the performance measure selection. And then what change can we make that will result in improvement? That's going to work you through your different proposed interventions after doing some discovery through the setting of the AIMS process, selecting your performance measures, which you tease out from that discovery process and dialogue. Identifying your change ideas is a really fun space because I'm like super nerdy about root cause analysis. I think that's a really awesome exercise and experience, and it's amazing how that informs you versus maybe the different sentiments you or the team or your boss or somebody has versus root cause analysis. That can be fun. And then implementation is where the testing of change ideas comes into play. And I think a couple of things that are really fantastic about the model for improvement, or another selected methodology, is that every improvement becomes an activity and an opportunity that you can encourage and create a culture of a systematic and data-driven approach to implementing change, testing change, and sustaining change. Applying the model for improvement and applying a methodology is not only expected per PCN 1502, but the bonus is that this allows you to take that shift from people or personality or things like that and really bring out that this is a process problem. So the model for improvement helps you make that culture shift. And Michael was talking earlier a little bit about kind of, you know, running around and putting out fires, or maybe folks feel like we have so many different things going on at once. And oftentimes I think organizations, you know, they're changing in all directions, and that comes from an enthusiastic effort, and it comes from a good space for improvement, but it kind of gets you nowhere, and it can exhaust you and then kind of muddy, you know, are the changes we're making leading to improvements? So the last thing I'll say here is that the model for improvement really helps create the discipline of a systematic process to develop and then test your change ideas. We can go to the next slide. So we touched on a little bit of other methods, right? You don't have to use the model for improvement. That's not the only one. There are other QI methods, but it's good to keep in mind that whatever method is selected be fully described in your CQM plan and have performance focus so that your organization's activities speak to the larger EMA HSDA-wide activities, and that relevant reporting is available for the selected methodology. So part of participation in the EMA HSDA-wide project will be reporting qualitative and quantitative updates to our friends at the AA. Lastly, you know, mixed methods, those are okay too. Again, you want to make sure they're described in your CQM plan. And other than the model for improvement, Lean, and Six Sigma, there's different healthcare derivatives of these methods that are really most common across the Ryan-White system, you know, from a national perspective. We can go
I
to
see in the chat room, happy birthday, Karen.
Oh yeah, happy birthday. Whoop, whoop.
Birthday.
So let's talk a little bit about methods versus tools and how do you differentiate? Well, first, it's pretty common for the line to be blurred and people confuse methods and tools. But methods have a very prescribed order of activities, and you've got to have fidelity to the process. Whereas tools, they can be used across different methods and applied for multiple purposes.
I think this is an interesting point, Jamie, because a lot of times people will look at, you know, PDSA and then will say that the method that they're using is PDSA. The PDSA is a process that itself has multiple tools. You know, people will say, oh, I did a QI project, I have a fishbone. No, a fishbone is a tool, and the tool is part of the project. But tell me more. What did the fishbone tell you, and what did you do with that information? That's the project. So it's really important. I don't know, I'm sure that you have other examples too, Jamie, that you can draw from in terms of these types of confusions. But I wanted to highlight this because I thought that this was such an important error or challenge that people have.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's, you know, it's continuous learning. We're all human, so we're continuously learning. But it's definitely been my experience. You know, folks have an idea. They want to improve blank, and so they do a fishbone, and then they go, right? They neglect all of the three questions. They neglect, like, what is the selection of your performance measure? What is your data? What is your baseline? What is your target? You know, and it all comes from a good space, but a lot of times it can be sort of ready, fire, aim, you know what I mean? And we kind of get ahead of ourselves, or we feel expectation to produce and produce quickly. And, you know, I understand being pushed and pulled in those ways as well.
We're all here together.
Yeah, right. We're all in it together. So again, you know, as Michael was saying, like the model for improvement, it's much more than the PDSA cycles and the information you gain from that. Those, the PDSA cycles and that testing of change, that's just part of it. One of the things I often tell people, especially when it comes to testing change, is that iteration is your friend, right? So be prepared to do something kind of over and test change multiple times, and then lean into what is value adding about that. You know, what you learn from each testing of change, what you can apply to your next test of change cycle. So just keep in mind that it's implicit to performance-focused QI methods. There's the dynamic cycles, which is similar to PDSA, and that's a lean thing, and that's kind of like define, measure, analyze, improve, control. They have various steps to that. And PDSA cycles are the same thing as PDCA cycles. Now I think it's time to hand it over to Oscar for a little poll poll.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, let's show the polling. We always want to know your point of view. And the polling said the first question, well, you can read that. Your agency, that's a multiple choice. What QI methods are in place in your agency that you're using right now? And the second question is about the understanding and difference between QI methods and QI tools. After the explanation from Jamie, I mean, we have a clear understanding of methodology and tools that you use to apply that methodology in QI.
All right. I know that we have some homegrown methods in place from other conversations that I had with folks, so glad to see that one being populated.
Yeah, we have 60% of the participant have answered. I will ask the rest of the group, please participate in our polling and let us know that you're here. We appreciate that. It's a beautiful Monday.
All right, let me share the poll.
All right. Here we are. We have like a little over 50%, 57% of the model for improvement. That's actually was very well practiced by the state last year on PDSA. Everything was related with that, and hopefully that everybody got a grasp on that. No knowledge on no participant or no activities around Lean or Six Sigma or other kind of method, and 36% of you mentioned like have no idea. So that's good to hear. We need to know that. And the understanding that you have the difference between the QI the methods and the QI tools, 14% well, now clear understanding of that. And 57, almost 60% of you, yes, you do know. Well,
Oscar, I'm
yes.
sorry. If I can just say a quick comment too. Some of the participants in the session today are not primary CQM staff, so they may not know what methodology their agency is using. So, and that's fine too. I just wanted to throw that out there. So everybody on here on the call is not somebody who's on the CQM, team focused on CQM projects and all that. So that might impact how we interpret the results of these questions.
Okay, I thank you, Angie. That's actually a very good point to bring that up. And I just received a text from Natasha, which is on the phone, that they used model for improvement, Fishbone, and 5 Whys. So they use 5 Whys.
Great. Well, thank you for that context, and thanks, Oscar, for leading us through the poll. Jamie's now going to walk us through an overview of the QI project lifecycle.
Yeah, so I think it's important to keep in mind, just with any data, to always be mindful of how to leverage the experience evaluation information in your dialogue on improvement. So really you have the discovery phase, your root cause, kind of change idea phase, and then implementation. And I think the next slide really goes into detail. So during discovery, you assess. During the root cause analysis and exploring of change ideas, it's where you kind of diagnose the situation, and your implementation is about intervening in that to drive the change you hope to see. So with this, you can see here that the tools can be used for multiple purposes across the QI project life cycle. So if you start at the top left, we see the discovery phase. So based on the model for improvement, the aim, which comes out of the first of those 3 questions, the aim we consider will be drawn from existing performance measurement data. And then the next step has to do with brainstorming and consolidating data. It's about refining the problem. So this is an important opportunity. If you think about having viral suppression, Is that across the board? Is that across, you know, all age, all race? Are there different disparities? And then how do we know? What is our data telling us? From the top right, we can see the root causes and the driver step. And then by the time your eyes kind of take you down to the bottom, you can see the generation of change ideas that the QI project team is interested in testing. And then in the lower left corner, the group has tested their change ideas, and then they begin formalizing change so that you know, the successes can be sustained. Let's talk about the discovery phase. So there's different ways you can kind of get in here and investigate, right? There's standard work, which is the work that we do as part of our job descriptions, and it's often rooted in our performance measurements and performance. So QI activities like peer review or supervision, they may identify opportunities for improvement. Your performance measures may also identify opportunities for improvement, and also, you know, you can do some disparity analysis as well. That's included. So, you know, it's good to keep in mind not every issue needs to be elevated to a QI project level. Sometimes you can just make small adjustments, and that can be made without a formal activity or, you know, a larger scale effort. And the next slides, I know we're going to go into that. So examples might be, you know, problems that have one recommended solution versus a problem that has, you know, a ton different aspects. So I like this little visual, and I actually first learned this from Michael Hager and some folks, I don't know, in like 2015 or something. It feels like a really long time ago, even though it probably wasn't. But I enjoy this visual as you look at your probability versus impacts. People have maybe utilized an effort yield matrix or other kind of visuals to help you identify where to keep your focus. And I want to actually go into the next slide because I also really like that. So here's a benefit effort, you know, impact effort. Sometimes that can be a little interchangeable. So, you know, let's say the group has identified a problem and some root causes, and then they're proposing different interventions and things that they want to test. So as a facilitator, as a quality champion, you know, how do you help the group kind of distill where you want to set your energy? So what you want to do is you want to kind of map out what has a high benefit, but doesn't require as intensive an effort. And that's what you see in the top left corner. Those are the activities that you want to pursue. Things that are also low effort and do have a good to moderate benefit, those are your quick wins. So you want to also, you know, be able to implement those, kind of take the low hanging fruit, take the quick wins as well. Issues that take a lot of effort and but still have a really high benefit. Those are maybe your stretch goals, your kind of stretch projects, and those are things you want to consider for major projects. They're big picture, kind of eye on the prize, and they're still super important. However, the space you want to avoid are the things that require a lot of effort but do not have comparatively as great of a benefit. And I can't tell you enough sometimes how much just kind of mapping this out and doing this kind of activity has been incredibly helpful for groups and teams, so that we have consensus about the direction we're heading and why, and also we're operating in a really efficient manner. You know, we're all asked to do a whole lot, and this can be a very helpful tool.
And both of these are things that you don't need to do as an individual or even as a small group of folks, but you could actually do this once you form a QI project team. You have the QI project team working together, you know, so that it takes the pressure off of one person or a small group of people and makes this the team project, makes this the group project.
Totes. Okay, so this is a very exciting, this is the disparity calculator. Feel free to use the chat to let me know who's maybe familiar with this, so I have an idea. So the disparity calculator is super helpful, right? We've got to refine problems, and if we really want to hit different viral suppression targets, you know, we've got to look at where the disparities exist. So the disparity calculator allows you to look at viral load suppression, and there's also a way to apply kind of an engagement and care metric. And essentially it runs absolute disparity, relative risk, comparative disparity, and odds ratio So for people who feel a little, intimidated by statistics, or people who feel like they've got a lot on their workload, and so running statistical analysis is cumbersome, this is super helpful because you really can plug in your numerator and denominator, and then this disparity analysis happens on the back end. And then this sheet is a nod to that impact focus matrix, where it will identify where a disparity exists for each of those different statistical analysis tests. So again, you want to go to the group that has the most disparity observed. So in this example, Hispanic people with, I believe, viral load suppression. And then also, the cool tool is with the absolute impact, it looks at how many people would we need to change this indicator for in order to eliminate the disparity. So this helps you ensure that you are focusing your area, but where energy is best directed. So let's talk about root causes and drivers of change. Just because we as individuals or teams identify a need, it does not mean that we know everything about that need on its surface. Hashtag guilty, can't tell you enough. Like, did you all write this about me? No, I'm just playing. The problem. Root cause without the help of stakeholders. This is absolutely where the diversity of teams and the diversity of thought is going to be really important. Root causes lend themselves to drivers that then can be tied to individual change ideas, which are intended to address the root cause or facilitate the driver. And we'll talk a little bit more about like what all this boils down to. So the root cause is the evil at the bottom, which sets in motion the entire cause and effect chain, which is leading to the problem and then the symptoms. And I think it was Karen who maybe talked about the 5 whys. So this is a great example where you can do a root cause analysis approach that's geared at really drilling down and getting to the true root cause. And this is a fantastic exercise because it's what pulls us from looking at the surface level of an issue, and we can sort of leverage, the other brain power in the room to help us understand the root cause. So there are definitely some more general problem-solving techniques, while others offer support for the core activity of root cause analysis. So by becoming acquainted with root cause analysis, you'll be able to apply the appropriate technique or tool to actually address the problem. So one of the things about the 5 whys, for folks who aren't as familiar, is you have your problem. So the group collectively asks why, and then you write down, the rationale. And then you ask, well, why is that? And then why is that? And you drill down five times, and that gets you to your root cause. The other helpful hint when you're doing the 5 why exercise is then to read what the group had come up with, read it backwards. This is happening, therefore the next thing happens, therefore the next thing happens. And that's a way of sort of checking what the group has come up with in order to then identify how you want to address the specific problem that you discovered. Here's another familiar friend in the QI world. This is our fishbone diagram, also known as cause and effect. And I've used this a number of times. I think it's also a fun tool. You basically have in that larger rectangle square there on the far right of the screen, that would be the issue, that would be the pain point in your process. And then the team collectively comes up with the different ideas that contribute to that. So oftentimes the standard is to look at people, environment, materials, methods, and equipment. Those are all often very common contributing factors, but your QI team can name these a little bit different to something that more suitably fits. Environment might be your data systems, or there's different ways you can tease this out and make this, maybe make the words resonate a little bit more with your agency or your team. But fishbone diagram is certainly helpful. So once the team is kind of put up, here are the things, like maybe a lack of standard training or so forth and so on. Once they generate the contributing factors, then you can begin to ask yourselves, what do we have the ability to affect change over? Maybe we can't change everything about, larger systems. However, we can implement routine training or standardization of training, or we can better define exclusions for our performance measure data. So our performance measure data is a little bit more robust. And then once you identify areas that you can affect change, that's when you can start to launch your initiatives. Awesome. You can go to the next slide. And driver diagrams. So these are also really super fun. I'm a visual learner, so shout out to the visual learners online today. Driver diagrams create a visual display of what drives achievement of a project aim. And it can become a clear picture of a team's shared view on how to achieve the aim. So this is good for common purpose sharing and consensus and really getting everybody on the same page. Driver diagram uses it's a stakeholder communication tool, and it becomes a team roadmap for testing change ideas. You see relationships between primary drivers and secondary drivers of specific change ideas. And then these change ideas can become the basis of different PDSA cycles. They have to be measurable. So you can do a driver diagram and it can give you lots of different iterations of things to test for change, which can be really a resourceful tool. All right, Michael, take it away.
All right, cool. So, and it should be noted that most of the tools that were just shown, where it says courtesy of IHI, you can actually go to the IHI QI Tools Toolkit and find these tools and instruction sheets and templates that are fillable PDFs and so much more. So we wanted you just to be aware that you can go online and kind of do some clicking and hunting for yourself. And hopefully the toolkit will give you a good sense of where to start. And of course, you can always Google us, email us, and we'll be able to provide you with some advice on that as well. The last phase in the QI project lifecycle is implementing tests of change. And when we implement our change ideas, it's actually not as easy as it sounds. We've gone through all this work so far to develop what changes we possibly could make that will lead to improvement. But now what we need to do is to carefully plan those tests of change. We can't just rush in and do the tests, because if we do, then that is kind of lending to that problem we talked about at the beginning, where it feels like we're always rushing around to put out fires. And especially for our leadership that's like, well, you just went through this big long process to come up with these change ideas. I just want you to do them. You can't do it that way, because you need to think about, well, you know, what does each one of these change ideas really mean? You know, in order to really provide the opportunity to really let that change idea shine and potentially be successful, you need to plan it out. So part of this then is to carefully document your progress. There's so many standard formats available. We'll talk about a couple of them. The CQM team at the AA will have one as well that will be the standard form that they'll hope that you'll use as well. But documenting progress is really important for the actual life cycle itself too, because you need to be able to capture the learning. As Jamie mentioned, if we have 6 or 7 possible solutions to a single problem, we might test 4 of those, and then we want to know if we're changing our policies and procedures for our organization. We need to know what exactly we need to do to make that change happen and to make it stick. We're not going to have a good sense of that if we haven't documented our progress, so that we can capture the nuanced context of what it was that we did that actually led to there being a difference. Because of course, there's dozens and dozens or innumerable ways or infinite ways that you can implement a change idea. So again, you need to plan it out. What does this change idea mean? And how are we going to bring it to fruition? And how are we going to document our progress as we go through? Another thing that's really important is to test just one change at a time. And you know, you can do that based on a prioritized list. So, you know, in terms of thinking about benefit versus effort, or thinking about impact, you know, it's really important to, you know, have a prioritized list. We're going to do this first, then this, then this. If you're making so many changes at once, you don't always have a good sense of, you know, how the outcome was affected by any one particular change. It could be about the way that you implemented them all at once. It becomes way too cloudy and messy to have an understanding, and your documentation won't make sense to the next person who's trying to look at it down the line. So making sure that you test just one at a time. Again, kind of eschewing this idea that we're running around putting out fires, and also eschewing that sense that like, hurry up and just go ahead and do it. Like, no, we have to be thoughtful. No, we have to be deliberate with our testing changes. And then finally, the rule of one. I think many of you have participated in various trainings in the past, but here the idea as a reminder is that if you're going to test a change idea, start with one staff person and just get a sense of what that one staff person in one day, what it's like for them. They may end up having insight into how you can improve your communication tools or process for how to expand that test of change to include maybe an entire point of service if you have multiple points of service. But the idea here is you start with just one and you grow upward, and your learning will cascade as you grow upward and become more inclusive and broad in how you're implementing your tests of change. So one of the most important things to think about is writing it down. I can't emphasize this enough, how we have to write it down. We have A3 as one standard format. There are so many different iterations of PDSA checklists and PDSA forms. Some of them are just PDSA with an empty box beneath it, and you just kind of write out, what was your planning? What were your implementation steps for the do? What was your learning in the study? And what is your next step in the act? PDSA forms are good because then you can, each cycle of the test of change becomes its own PDSA sheet that then kind of attaches behind the back. I like to do it that way as opposed to having one giant PDSA sheet for a test of change, because you end up running out of space in the plan and in the study. The do and the act tend to be a lot smaller, right? Because it's just implementation steps. But if you're making massive changes to the way that you're implementing a change based on feedback as you're implementing it, you might end up having several sets of action steps based on the way that you're implementing it. So I think that it's clean to have one form per cycle. The A3 form is set up that way already, where there's different regions of a large piece of paper. And A3, for trivia fans, is the largest piece of paper that can be faxed traditionally. So the idea here is you want to give yourself enough room that you can put all the information that's needed to communicate about your QI project. I like A3 as well because it's a really neat way to help to tell your story, because it organizes all the information in a way that helps the eye to see what was the discovery phase, what did the root cause phase turn out for you, and what changes are you going to be implementing. Step measurement is an important process I'm going to talk about in a minute, and I think this really helps to clean up some of the challenges that we have in terms of how we chart our progress. So my colleagues and I were laughing that we call this the missing link article, you know, from QI, because a lot of times we get focused. Here's my pointer. Where's my pointer? Okay, so a lot of times we get focused up here, right? Like we're focused on viral suppression, viral suppression, viral suppression, viral suppression. And so we think that if I implement a change today on the way that I do a specific type of follow-up call or a specific type of counseling or peer interaction with my clients, that like I'm going to be able to see a change in viral suppression. No, you're not. The activity you're doing with your clients today is going to affect their ability to stay and maintain in care, and that downstream is going to affect their viral suppression. So what does this mean then if I have a viral suppression project and I'm trying to test change? Well, what we need to do is to think about the different processes that lead to the outcome. And then to take an even further step back, what are the steps that go into that process? Okay, and you can see here how we have our, we start down here with our test of one. So we have an anecdotal, you know, test of change. Then maybe we include an entire point of service and all the staff there. And then we get to the point that we include a much larger set of our staff. But the idea here is that what we're measuring are these individual steps, as opposed to thinking about the main dish du jour, or the main outcome measure that we're trying to affect. So this is what it looked like in the state of New Jersey when we implemented this idea here. So the leading outcome is percentage of patients virally suppressed. That's what we're trying to affect. And so the process measures that lead into that are thinking about this behavioral health integration project. Patients who are screened for mental health challenges are more likely to be diagnosed, and then they're likely to be treated. And then because they're treated for their behavioral health challenges, then they're more likely to stay in care. And because they're more likely to stay in care, they're more likely to achieve viral suppression. But that's the way that you have to think about this, right? So you can see here that there's a number of process measures that play into viral suppression. And in this particular project aspect, people were looking at just the mental health screening piece, okay? So you can see here, we can get distracted by all kinds of things, but we've decided to focus on just the mental health screening piece, okay? So what goes into that? Okay, well, if we're gonna have good mental health screening data, we need to have staff believing that the responses given by patients are true. If I'm asking a patient if they're in distress and they're like, no, you know what I mean? Like, it's about the quality of engagement, folks, and about the way that the provider actually believes the patient. Patients that have positive experience, because conversationally at this particular clinic, I believe it was Atlanticare, they were having patients saying, you know, I just go ahead and answer these damn questions because I get asked these questions every time. And if I answer the wrong way, I get sent to see this person who's mean to me, you know? So that's really important to think about and consider that that is part of this project. And, you know, part of a possible step measure you can include the number of process map revisions, the percentage of staff receiving customer service training, the percentage of staff educated on behavioral health importance, the percentage of patients, you know, that receive education on behavioral health importance. When you think about step measures, you don't measure every single one of these. You pick one or two that ends up being most important to your patients and the process of treatment that you have between your staff and your patients. So this is, again, thinking about how we can identify all of the endless possibilities so that we can be focused and deliberate and select one or two that's going to end up really helping us to get at what we're trying to do. Okay, so I don't see anything in the chat room on that just yet. So I'm going to go ahead and start going into my examples. So let's just start really easy. So evolution of the necktie. Where did it come from and why do we have so many different sizes and colors? So this is the idea that people, you know, in the Renaissance era had this kind of like large drapey clothing, as you can see the gentleman on the right here. And when the King of France hired a bunch of Croatian mercenaries during the 30 Years' War, so this is in the 1700s, the King of France was delighted by the way that the Croatians had buttons here, but no buttons at the top. And instead they tied the top of their shirt together with an actual tie. And you can see here, this is the gentleman on the right is actually an example of a 17th century Croatian missionary. And you can see how his shirt is literally tied at the top. And the King of France was so enamored by this look that he actually ordered his military to start, you know, having this type of look as well. And he also ordered all of his courtiers to have this look when in the court. So it wasn't something that became, you know, across the entire country, but it was for the rich and the powerful that this was fancy. And so because of this rich, fancy look that was happening among the elites, then of course, then the rest of the population looks at this and they're like, wow, I want to do that too. That's really cool. And so it proliferated all of the different colors and sizes and shapes that we have for ties. But the original word for tie in French is le cravate, which means cravat, which is what this is. So we can see here that basically the idea, the evolution of the necktie came from an elite that thought, wow, that's really neat and fancy, and everyone just has to do it. But it's not something, it's not a healthcare QI example. So let's think about something else that's also not a QI example. So do your homework. So here we have a problem. My kids can't seem to get their homework done. And so the aim would be, my kids need to complete their homework in a timely fashion, not a timeline fashion, but a timely fashion. In the discovery phase, you have notes home from teachers, you have the report cards, you have my kids' own self-report of their inability to complete their homework. The discovery phase, again, is about thinking about all the data that you have available to make a decision. And of course, this data is what helped produce the aim too. Probably the note home from the teacher was the one that spurred that the most, right? But the report card might also have done that as well, depending on the relationship that you have in your family. So root causes. So careful notation of what factors are contributing toward and preventing the timely completion of homework. So this is literally an example drawn from one of my colleagues. And in fact, that benefit and effort matrix that we had with the 2 triangles is literally the outcome of this process that she did with her teenage son. And so in terms of identifying those root causes, then change ideas were associated with each of them that created that matrix that we had with all like the A through Q. So she did this with her son, created just an Excel sheet, like the things that are, all the different root causes and change ideas that are kind of like related to those root causes. And then, so thinking about television. If television is a distraction, then you can't turn it on until a set time or until homework is done. Or siblings actually coming over and having their friends kind of like, traipse through the house was listed as another thing that was challenging. So, the idea that your siblings can't have their friends over until everyone's done with their homework. So you can see here then that those change ideas were, put on a matrix. Like, so how hard is it for you to do this one? And how hard is it for your sibling to remember not to invite their friends over? And what's the benefit, of doing that? So literally, this is the example that generated that benefit versus effort matrix. Let's look at another example. Since we already looked at the BHIP for Atlanticare's step measures. So, problem. Viral suppression is identified as a problem statewide for people living with HIV in New Jersey who have co-occurring mental health and substance use issues. So there, the aim was kind of hovered in and put, before Atlanticare. So Atlanticare did a discovery, and what they saw was that there's a high level of screening, but a low level of identified behavioral health disorders and disease. So if 100% of 1,000 patients are screened, you would expect to see 200 to 300 of those patients having an identified disorder based on the literature. In fact, what we know is that it could be as many as 70% of people could have a behavioral health disorder, especially in a place like Atlantic City. So the root causes. So the manner in which the screening occurs is not culturally competent was something that came up out of experience evaluation. The patient said, I don't understand why you're asking me all these questions all the time. You ask me the same damn questions with a flat affect, and it just makes me feel like you don't care. Patients are burned out on the screening, so they give false or fast answers just to get it over with. So the idea of like, if I answer the wrong way, you're gonna go make me see that mean lady. Screw that. Everything's great. So the screeners are not documenting their results in the records. So this idea of, there's limited time in the day. My patients have needs. And so I'm filling out these forms, and then pushing the paper, as opposed to entering it in the record and having a direct tie. I have identified someone who has a problem, and I need to contact someone to do a warm handoff. I can't just be like, oh, I've identified a problem on this piece of paper, and I'll put the piece of paper over here. So those were the main root causes that were identified. So the tests of change that they selected were focused on task shifting. So maybe the data entry doesn't need to be done by the people who are screening. Or maybe we can have different people screening, since the people who are doing screening are not doing it very well or successfully. We could have peer review of documentation or peer review of the way that certain types of conversations go. A lunch and learn where there are case studies and examples was also implemented, and an ongoing analysis of data to identify folks in needs of services based on other multifactorial analysis. You know, they have a data analyst, so what does that data analyst do? They should try to find people who have intersections of issues that then make them predisposed for mental health challenges. So these examples, you know, really were meant to help you kind of think about this from, you know, a theoretical fun standpoint, but then a more practical everyday standpoint, and then kind of refining in on the HIV field. So what do you do next? This is a lot of information, and it's always like drinking from a fire hose when you chill with us. But we, you know, have some steps that we think that will help here. So first things first, take a breath. The CQM team is still finalizing the EMA and HSDA wide QI project. And so when it is finalized, we'll have a presentation in one of these sessions where we'll be walking through the entire project, how it was, you know, what was the discovery phase, and what are the different aspects that we're hoping that you're going to be able to join us on as you continue the discovery phase in your own sites, and as you do root cause analysis and generate change ideas. The project will be focused on engagement in care, and it will have engagement in primary medical care, I should say. And it will have relevance for all subrecipients. So thinking about like those of you who are not OAHS providers, you're funded for a reason, and the Planning Council has dedicated scarce resources to the services that you provide. And so as part of the care system and network, there are critical aspects of the services you provide and how that lends itself to a patient's ability to stay in care. So there is really high relevance for all subrecipients, regardless of whether you're an OAHS provider or not. What we want you to do until this is announced is to continue with your agency-based projects. You know, if there is a concern that there's going to be a traffic jam in projects, we'd love to hear about that as soon as possible. You know, or if you have any questions or concerns about how your agency-based project will either complement or, you know, not line up with the EMA or HSDI wide project, we'd like to hear those concerns as well. And please reach out to the CQM team if you have any question about this. And of course, this is an offer that is lasting forever. If you ever have any questions or concerns about the QI project or how what you're doing at your site either adds to or is misaligned with what's happening at the recipient level, definitely reach out and ask that question.
Please.
Okay. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to our partners at the state who are going to be sharing a spotlight with us on their QI project that they have at the state level. And Julie, you should be able to share. If not, then let me know and I will give you permission.
Okay, thank you, Michael. I don't think it's giving me permission. Let me see. What? Yes. Okay. Got it. Okay. So this is the viral suppression statewide project for the state of Texas. So we're using our Texas slides here. So this is a huge project, right? Macro level. There's over 90,000 people in our program, or not in our program of Ryan White, but in Texas living with HIV. So this is a macro level view. So we're gonna talk about the Achieving Together, which is actually the big statewide project for ending the epidemic, and then viral suppression is a subset of that, along with some other performance measures and initiatives that hopefully you all are familiar with at this point. So part of the spotlight. Yes.
I'm sorry. Should we see your slides right now?
Yes, you're not seeing them yet?
I don't know if anybody else can.
No, I'm
Okay,
not seeing
sorry,
them
let me
either.
try it again. Technology, do you see them now?
Not
No.
yet.
Just your beautiful face.
Oh, great. My nervous, beautiful face. Okay, do
There
you
we
see
go.
them now?
There we
Now
go.
we see that.
Good.
Thank you.
Woo-hoo.
It's Monday morning, right? Okay, so let me move forward. I know we don't have a lot of time. So again, macro level, big project. We're gonna just start with our Ending the Epidemic plan, which viral suppression is a subset of that. Hopefully you're all familiar with the Achieving Together plan that was developed by all the stakeholders of Texas, including communities. So part of the spotlight highlights or topics we were to discuss were the project aim and timeline. So as you guys talked about earlier, some projects seem to go on forever. And for the HIV/STD branch of the health department, viral suppression is an ongoing project forever. So we break it into incremental steps. So since the Achieving Together to End the Epidemic is such a huge macro project, we actually have a vision statement that does align with our health department vision statement. So that is, Texas will become a state where HIV is rare and every person will have access to high quality prevention and care services regardless of age, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, and socioeconomic circumstances. And then from that, we've broken it down into our aims, right? So our aims are our 90-90-90 measures. So here we are, the viral suppression section. So we've been measuring this forever, as you all know. So this is a slide straight off of our Achieving Together website. So we can see that by our timeline is by 2030 that we will achieve these indicators right here with these goals. So you can see we're already on the right track. We're at 86% based on our 2018 data. Last week we talked about the surveillance data. There's some problems with lab issues. So we will have our 2019 data hopefully in December. Usually we have it by now where we could be updating our progress. But it looks like we're doing really well so far. So our first one is PrEP for those who are interested in taking PrEP for prevention and then other prevention efforts. Then we want to make sure everybody knows their status following the care continuum in general, right? So currently the state is looking to be at 86% viral suppression of those people that are in care. So that doesn't include the whole bunch of people that aren't in care. So that's another measurement set. So you always got to know what you're looking at when you're looking at measurements, right? So some of the data sources that we used in the discovery were just all kinds of data, right? Overall state surveillance data, electronic lab data, ARIES data, etc. And we have a lot of that data available right on the Achieving Together website, including for the Dallas area. We did do root cause analysis for this big macro project with our HIV syndicate group, which includes stakeholders from all across Texas, including people from community. So we did a fishbone, so to speak, by using Post-it notes and big giant butcher board or big white papers taped to the wall. We spent 2 days together a couple of times between 2016 and 2018, where we would analyze and break down and brainstorm ideas. Here's some pictures of us doing that at some of the meetings, right? And then we launched the plan with the whole state of Texas at our conference in 2018. And that's what this picture shows. But this is just a little part of the room. This was a huge room we were in for a couple of days where we broke it down, doing the planning, the brainstorming. Then all of these papers would be gathered back and analyzed by our planners, myself, other people. It was just a huge group effort. And then we came up with the guiding factors, the performance measures, and all the stuff that goes into our Achieving Together plan. Some of the tools and resources that have come out of this are our website. We have a viral suppression toolkit. If you all aren't familiar, please visit the website or reach out to me. We did priority population affinity sessions for the populations that we identified through looking at data that need the most support. We have a health equity group, Transgender Alliance Resource Guide, along with many other tools. And again, we are focusing our efforts on treatment as prevention, as y'all are familiar with. One of our latest things that came out last week is our status neutral focus, and that's what we're hoping y'all are moving towards. We know that some of you in Dallas have already shifted to this, so that is awesome. But breaking it down further from the statewide group, then we have our Ryan White Part B viral suppression work, right? And then further down, we have the work that y'all are doing at the regional level, and then even down at the subrecipient level where the care is actually happening, care and services. So I'll just briefly show you a little bit about what we're doing with the Ryan White Part B. This is Oscar. He was involved in our End Disparities project, which was going on most of the last couple of years. We break all of our projects, regardless of what we're working on. They have to fit into one of these 4 domains. It either has to be improving outcomes, access to care or services, the client or patient experience, or in some way eliminating some sort of disparity, most likely related to healthcare. So some of the things that we worked on in the last couple of years were, again, participating in the End Disparities Echo. So at the state level, this was great for us because this helped, because Texas is so large, there's all kinds of different challenges depending on which region you are in. So this project allowed subrecipients to work on things that they identify using the disparities data calculator and other research and discovery finding activities for the projects that they want to work on. So that helped it overall, the overall state viral suppression rates increase as a outcome. We're always working on capacity building. Since we don't have direct connection to clients and patients, we depend on you guys as the subrecipients to do the work, but we want to make sure that you have the tools you need to do that work successfully. So we've been implementing all kinds of different capacity building programs, fundamentals for case managers, provider, panel echo for clinicians, nurses, and other healthcare workers. But I know this is a short spotlight, so let me move on. This is a sample. We use an Excel spreadsheet, just like we talked about earlier. We keep an action plan. This is just like a very short snapshot of it, of some of the things we're doing. When do we expect this to be completed, and what is the status? In our action plans, we always want to know who are we targeting or trying to help. What domain is that from those 4 domains? This one could be lots of things. This could be improving health outcomes and the experience and eliminating disparities. But anyway, so on and on, this goes on for pages, but we're always looking at our data. We use run charts. So this is data from 2016 through Q3 of 2020. We've went up and down. We have a goal, that's our green line. We have our actual quarterly data is here. And then this is our average. So that's like everything combined. So we're going in the right direction. This is out of Aries. So I want to make sure everyone understands that. This slide I showed earlier from Achieving Together shows us at 86%. This shows us at 80, which identifies there's a problem with the Aries data, right? So we're working on that. I know Dallas is working on that as well. We feel that viral suppression is totally impacted by retention and ARV prescription. So we also monitor that and do that quarterly. We reflect back to our action plan during this time. Did anything change? We have goal charts and other tools that we use on a regular basis. Whoops. So here's some folks from across Texas who participated in the End Disparities Collaborative with us. We ended up doing storyboards and got to present at the actual HRSA offices. A new collaborative is coming out soon, so I really hope you guys take advantage of that. That's the whole group shot of some of the folks that got to come. You can see some Dallas folks were there. There's Oscar, there's me. You might know some of these other people. But anyway, thank you so much. Really quick, if I have time, I just want to show you one more thing. This is our spreadsheet that we use, and we have how to use the spreadsheet on the first workbook. Then we have the total description of our performance measures that we're going to be looking at, so there's no confusion. Then we do our outcomes. Then we have goals. So we're always, this is our study part, right, of the PDSA section, or cycle rather. So we're always making sure to look at the numerators and denominators to let us know if something's missing. Is there a big chunk of data missing? We keep our goal quarterly. Are we meeting it or not? Do we need to readjust, etc.? Same thing with retention, our descriptor, our outcome, our goal data, etc. So we have this for retention, ARV, and viral suppression, and it all goes back to following our QM action plan. And that's all I have. Does anyone have any questions?
You got some great shout outs in the chat room, Julie.
Oh, good. I'm kind of nervous, as you can tell by my voice. But anyway, thank you guys so much for all the work you do is what impacts, you know, our increases or our improvements. So we couldn't do this without you, obviously. So I'm so glad that we're here together today, learning these great concepts from Michael and Jamie and the Dallas team. And keep up the good work. I see us moving the right direction, right? We're building up some momentum, and all we can do is keep moving up, in my opinion.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Julie and Brian. All right, Regina, want to get us into the breakouts?
Yes, so now everyone, it's time to go into our breakout sessions. You will receive a little square box there that'll ask you to join and accept. And when your time is up, you'll be notified that it'll time to rejoin the group. And you can either click or it will automatically zap you back in.
That's right. And we only have about 15 minutes, unfortunately, for our breakout, but we hope that we'll be able to stir some great conversation with the time that we have and have a brief report out. So stand by as I open the rooms. All right. Hi, everybody. So I have, oh, look at Norma with what is that? Aurora Borealis. There we go. My brain's not working this morning. I need more coffee, friends. So in our group, we should have ASD, Parkland, Cali Clinic, and Brian Center. So if you're in the wrong room, just let me know and we'll try to switch you out to another room. So, all right. So the first question that I have is, how's everybody doing today?
It's Monday.
It's Monday,
Yay.
That's right. Well, hi. So the first question is that I'd like to throw out is, what is the most recent QI project that you have at your subrecipient site? And if you want to provide any context around results or tools that you used or anything like that, I'd love to hear.
Yeah, I'd like to share. One we recently did was looking at improving our intake process, the time it takes us from meeting the client to actually getting them housed into a residence. So it involved 3 different departments: the intake department, the case manager department, and then also our residential coordinator. So what we saw was that there was a lag, 7 to 10 days to get a person from intake to actually housed in the building. And some were happening on weekends, starting on a Friday. There was lack of communication between departments and so forth. So we put together a Plan, Do, Study, Act quality improvement approach. And based on that, we developed some measurements. And it was a key quality measurement that we looked at every month during our quality management meeting. So during that meeting each month, we measured how we were doing. And by the end of about 18 months, we finally had it tuned to within 2 or 3 days that we improved from a 10-day 7 to 10 day window to almost less than 3 days from getting that intake to actually getting them housed with the residential coordinator. So that benefited the client and as well as the operational aspects.
It's wonderful. Thanks, Dwight. Who else wants to share?
I'm happy to go. I always identify whenever you're saying what the pitfalls are is that we have too many projects in the fire. So that's my team on the line can absolutely identify with my harried pace at times, trying to coordinate and narrow down the field. A recent project that we've tackled is addressing access into our care system. And of course, it's taken multiple iterations and several ideas that have changed. It began with looking at the disparities and what groups weren't getting in to care within a timely fashion, and we saw some disparities. Our disparities began grouping within an age demographic, those under 35. If we drill down, we saw our Black males under 35 in particular. Also from root cause analysis, we saw that provider availability was a big factor. Our providers were pulled a myriad of different ways, so just the timeline for them to have an open slot was an issue. So over the course of a year and a half or 2 years, my goodness, it seems like this time, the never ending project, we've slowly made our way towards narrowing the days where it used to be possibly up to a month to be able to get in for a new visit. Now we have the same day intake to ISV slots. We made big changes just hiring staff. Mid-levels versus MD, so licensure made an impact, being able to hire very competent and able staff that were there for a consistent time, and then drilling down and really working on inter-team communication for that same day to where we have it prioritized in a myriad of different ways. It would take up a lot of time, but like just when they came, a client can walk in and the case management team knows to start that conversation immediately with the financial counselor, with the clinicians on staff, on deck that day, and is able to make sure that the clients are able to be seen if they want to be seen that same day. So that's been a big improvement for us, and we we'll keep on keeping on with the tailoring down. I really like some of your slides that you have. It should give us some good anchoring in to give our teams tasks, like a visual cue of how to see the work impacting this big concept like viral suppression, the bigger concept like retention, these outcomes, more manageable bite-sized pieces. I loved that one slide of that, that outcome, and then really drilling down. All the BHIP tools are in our, that's in our to-do list.
Well, cool. Anything that we ever share, if you're interested in more or, kind of examples that we can run through, like we're here for that. So definitely keep that in mind and latch onto it.
Okay.
Would anyone else like to share a recent QI project? Or I should say that if you haven't done a QI project recently, that's okay. This is a judgment-free zone, my friends. What I'd like to hear is just, what are some of the obstacles that have been in the way? Like, why haven't you been able to do a QI project? And it's a judgment-free zone.
Okay. Now that you've opened that door up. No, we have not done, we haven't done one recently. And one of the, well, obviously the issue has been COVID-19 and getting groups of people together. And we are in the process of, we've got Zoom lined up for our staff. And oddly enough, webcams are a hot item and can only be purchased like in small groups. So we've got our first batch of webcams, and we've ordered another batch. It's really interesting to me to see what COVID-19 has done to the supply chain. and how we're able to purchase things. And that was a shock to me, but when I think about it, yeah, I can see where people are wanting webcams. So that has been what we're working on, and when we've got that all lined up, I experimented with doing a total Zoom CQM meeting. That was kind of a fiasco, but we tried it, and I'm thinking that as we do this more, we'll get better at it.
Yeah.
Norma,
Yeah.
you aren't alone. We had a same bumpy WebEx. No matter the platform, the idea of virtual coming together with the clinic staff and administration and data, it was a whirlwind. It'll get better. It will get better.
Ours was horrendously bad, and I felt so bad. And I thought, okay, that was the first attempt. You know, it's kind of like driving. You get better, hopefully. So
That's right. Everyone has their Aaliyah moment, right? You just dust yourself off and try again. Yeah. No, you know, to that point, if you ever want to do little practices, that's something that is, you know, helpful, especially like we're creating a little community here of QI and QM folks. And so maybe there are things that we can do to kind of practice together. Another thing that's important to just keep in mind is that, you know, the National Quality Center created that game guide, and there's a couple of us that are now currently looking at, like, we need that more than ever in the virtual environment. And it's just like the game guide is like, look to the person to your right and blah, blah, blah. So we're trying to revise that to be more appropriate for virtual platforms, because again, we need it now more than ever.
Yeah, I haven't even gone to thinking games. Mine is more technical issues. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? We'll get better.
Thanks, Norma. Michelle, you trying to say something?
Yeah, I am. And I think I'm in the same boat with everybody else. It's, you know, how do we do our patient intakes? You know, because everything now is virtually. So the CQM committee, we're meeting, but we're meeting virtually and trying to make all of our changes, because it is a challenge. You know, everything's online. And little did we know we're all going to be IT pros, right?
Right.
So it's a challenge for some of our families. Right now, we're, you know, trying to find a secure way on how to submit important documents. But we're working along and you know, trying to see different vendors and see what's out there. So if you guys have any information, or how do you guys submit documents, that would be helpful for me as well, if anybody has any pointers. But yeah, that's what we're doing right now currently.
Thanks so much, Michelle. I think that it's important, and it's so good that many of you are focused on, you know, how do we keep the train running here in this environment, whether it's intakes or, you know, just the interactions that we have, you know, with our patients, or the interactions that we have as a staff to help best serve our patients. These are the main issues of the day, it's sounding like. And we're hopeful that, you know, when we announce the QI project, that there's going to be some really great opportunities to drill into these issues as it affects, you know, our system of care. And the overarching goal of our system is people living with HIV who are healthy and happy and can live long, healthful lives, and reduce the likelihood of transmission, which all speaks to viral suppression, of course. So we'll get there. Okay, so we only have about 3 to 4 minutes left. And I'm wondering, you know, the last question I have is, when you started in your role, what training or resources would have been helpful to help you be successful in QI and, you know, managing QI projects at your site? And is there anything that you wish the AACQM team could have done if there was a magic wand and we can go back in time? What types of resources and support would have been most helpful for you when you started off in your role?
I can speak to an advantage that I had with Parkland being C&D funded, which was access to trainings like coming to see, you know, D specific trainings like yours, NQC, the CQII. Those were fantastic and integral for my learning curve of what my role was to encompass and do in a large system. And what the Dallas area needed was that, which is this, a while back. You know, that honing in where A and B, larger institutions, larger groups of subrecipients that might not be C&D funded, with really, because C&D has it far more specific. There is a guideline, a game plan, a teaching manual, games. You know, I even know about game. There's consumer interaction. It's robust, because when C&D got around, it was specific and intentional. Not that A and B is not, but it was honed by the time that that funding became available, way before I joined. And so when I joined the team, that was in place for me to be able to go and get, you know, I had to travel, but still I was able to travel and get that insight. And I think that Dallas is catching up because they're just now getting that wider exposure to what more specific funding sources were getting a while back.
And to piggyback on what Piper said, I know Piper and I worked together. So when I was at Parkland, I had little or no quality training. And then when I went to Cali Clinic, the advantage of having Part D funding was we had access to a quality trainer that was wonderful and actually worked with us on a month-to-month basis, kind of getting us up to speed. I would love that. If only other organizations had that, I think that would be really wonderful. Additionally, the training through CQII was fantastic. I have attended, I don't know, 4 of them. I think I've done everything that has been pushed out there, and am waiting for more. And then the final thing, I think, this one. The final thing that, as I'm sitting here seeing all the slides, for Dallas in particular, is wouldn't it be great if we could get, you know, we talk about the fish bone, we talk about PDSA, we talk about lean. I think a little more interactive and I don't know how to do that from how we're doing it, but I know that when I attended the CQI trainings, it was a little more interactive.
So what I like about this, what I have found, because I worked at CQI for a number of years, and I think that the applied learning is what's most important. And even there, that could be ratcheted up even on their end. So thinking about, like, when we're working together across all of our range of experience and expertise or sophistication in quality, we need to make sure that there are lots of opportunities to drill into questions so that people who are champions can be champions, and people who are more remedial can be remedial and learn, you know, and there can be a lot more opportunities for the system to champion itself in this way. All right, welcome back, everybody. All right, so we did pretty good making it through all of our questions in our group. What I'd like to do is just to see if we could have a quick report out, no more than a minute per report out if possible. So Angie, would you like to share some of the highlights from our group?
Sure. Let me see my notes. We talked about some of the QI projects that were done recently. One was ASD improving intake process time from intake to housing from 7 to 10 days. Over 18-month period, they improved that to a 3-day process. Piper at Parkland talked about addressing access into care system, and after several iterations and about over a 1.5 year time frame for the under 35 and Black males under 35. they were able to cut down the time it takes to get an initial appointment from about 30 days to about 3 days, I think. Oh, wait, I can't even read what I said. I'm sorry. Piper, if that's not right, you can correct me. And then we had a couple who have not had an opportunity to do QI projects yet. And one was Cali Clinic, was due to COVID issues and technology issues. So they're working really hard right now to get Zoom and webcams so that they can begin to service their clients that way. In Brian's house, Michelle said that they've had some CQM meetings virtually, but they're still trying to figure out how to do intakes and submit documents securely. So if anyone has any information that they can, how they've successfully done that, they can send that to Michelle at Brian's house. And then we talked a little bit about what the people needed when they started in their roles, what they would like to have had and what they could use from the AACQM staff. Piper Parkland mentioned that it was very helpful to her because they were also part of Part C and D. And so they had every C and D kind of had a very robust program, and A and B was not as robust. So Dallas is a little bit behind, and we've been playing catch up with that. And then Norma at Cali Clinic mentioned that she had to gain some CQM access through, when she went to Cali Clinic, they had access to quality trainings and consultants there that have been very helpful to her in her role. If anybody wants to chime in, Piper, I saw something you put in the chat, but I didn't get to see it. But if anybody wants to chime in about 10 seconds, you can go ahead and do that.
You did great. It's just a larger effort, and it's we don't have enough time in the day. It's all good.
Okay, but thank you.
Thanks, Angie. Regina, want to debrief us on group 2?
Yes, okay, so I'm going to divert this to Jamie because my internet has been going in and out. I actually got the first part of Resource Center stating that they have a few projects, but the most upcoming is a client experience survey. In history, it's been in person in the past, and now exploring how to mail out without, with the concern of not, confidentiality concerns, and completing and returning of mail out surveys. And Jamie, if you can pick up on the end, because I blanked out.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. You know, I think the group talked a little bit about, you know, the challenge right now is kind of figuring out the process of client surveys, you know, in lieu of COVID, and the agency having to kind of go and break from tradition, which it's always been to do that in person. So thinking through that process. We had some folks mention looking at disparities amongst youth and other groups, as well as a couple of other clinic-based projects. When we talked about sort of, you know, being able to do projects or being able to utilize tools, you know, some agencies said, hey, man, I've not really gotten that opportunity. And then we also heard, you know, applying experience evaluation, and then as feedback for clinic appointments taking too long, and then applying a fishbone diagram to look at root cause, and the importance of engaging the entire clinic team and all folks involved in a process, shaping the change idea that you want to test. So we talked about that. And then lastly, we kind of talked about how these projects get shared up and get shared out.
Thanks so much. And group 3.
Sure. So we had 2 agencies in our group. The Bingham Dental, they don't actually have a selected model form or methodology selected yet. They do a lot of their work around patient experience or processes. They do engage in a lot of capacity building through the AETC. And they do a lot of work, but they haven't been documenting it. So they're going to work on that. And then AIN, they use performance measures for case management, linguistic services, and respite, which are the services that they provide. They also don't have a specific methodology that they use all the time. They also use a lot of patient or client experience information for projects. They do look at their data often. They are currently merging with AHF. So they will be meeting with their quality leadership in California soon to undertake their, agency or organizational specific performance measures and processes coming up. So they're excited about that. And yeah, that's about it. Unless anybody chime in if I missed anything.
Thanks, Julie, and thanks everyone for that debrief. So every single one of these sessions has some action planning. So we want to make sure that you know what is expected. In the action planning form for this time, we have a number of questions. It's a similar format to all the other ones. Really what we want you to do is to think about what data sources are available for use in QI project discovery. You know, we've talked a lot about the quantitative data, but we've also heard some about the experiential data that you have available too. So just thinking broadly about the data sources you have available for use in your own QI project discovery. Including anything on root cause analyses that have been included. So we've heard about 5 whys, we've heard folks mention the fishbone, but any other types of root cause analyses that you do, even if it's just a conversational piece. Driver diagrams count as well, though we've already covered that it's kind of like the opposite of a root cause, but you could include driver diagrams and whatnot there as well. What internal staff capacity building occurs around QI? So do you do standard trainings? Is it just when you hire someone, or does everyone need to go around the merry-go-round once a year? Or what does that look like? How do you train people? How do you talk about QI? And that's kind of getting at that question of culture, right? How do we strategically align our QI projects with our vision, mission, and values? Is that part of a conversation that you actually have, or are your potential topics just passed on to leadership and then the C-suite makes decisions for you? Or just thinking about how this happens. Or if this is an area where we need to, maybe kind of beef this up, like the way that we talk about our QI work and how it does align with our values, our vision, and our mission. How do QI teams operate at our agency, and who's involved? Does it typically just stick with me as in my own little island with a tree on it, or does it become more broad? Do we include just the QM committee, or are we like really reaching deeper and further into our staff and stakeholder sets to create broader QI teams? And then lastly, what do we do with our QI project results? Do they just stick with us, or do we communicate that? Does it go in a newsletter? Does it go on a patient bulletin board? Just thinking about, more broadly how we communicate what happens, so what, with this quality project. And a reminder, it's a good idea to do these action planning forums, between now and the next session, because all of these action planning forums will have a home on the final project that we're going to have as a poster for all of our subrecipient agencies. So, it's a good idea to not let it get too far away, because otherwise you're going to have a world of hurt by the time we're producing these posters. So we don't really have too much time, but I just wanted to see, does anyone have any burning questions or concerns that they'd like to share before we move to the final couple of slides here? All right, and Oscar, it looks like we have one more poll for the evaluation.
All right, well, we're waiting for the poll. I saw a question for Kelly Norca that how do we know that we're the French on the top? It's just clearing up the air. So we answer every single question you come up, we try to answer you guys, yeah. Tell us have the clear understanding of what is expected of you in a follow-up to today's webinar. We have 75% of you like knowing so far. In a quarter.
It's okay, it's a judgment-free zone. if we don't have a clear understanding, then we'll be able to go back and have a follow-up email to help with that. So it's looking like a follow-up email is a good idea.
Absolutely. I think that'll be interesting. For those who step out, yeah, they will receive that email. Like, we miss you guys, you didn't rejoin. So we want you to be involved and engaged in this.
Great. All right. Regina, you want to talk through, we have a couple of more pieces to go, right?
Yes, that is correct. So this was our last meeting to share overview and theory with you. So from here on out, we'll be sharing information on how to apply all the learning that we have to our work here in the Dallas EMA and HSDA. So the next one we have will be on QI project enhancing care engagement, program monitoring evaluation, and then the QI project poster symposium. And it's now back to Oscar.
That's right.
Thank you.
And one other thing that I'd like to share about, it's okay. One other thing I'd like to share about the upcoming schedule, and we hadn't talked about this internally yet, but instead of it being every 2 weeks, we might have a little bit more space because we don't want to share something that's not ready for game time yet. So in terms of thinking about our finalizing the EMA and HSDA project, we're going to practice what we preach and be very thoughtful about this, have it to a certain level of completion before we share with you. So I just wanted you to be aware of that it may be more than 2 weeks before our next session, depending on when we can get that finalized, but be on the lookout for your emails.
Right. Yeah.
And again, we want to thank you for your participation, your time. It's a Monday. And please don't forget, this is important for us. Give us your feedback. This is exactly what is quality on the improvement process for how to teach you better, how to place your needs on knowledge on this CQI process. This meeting and discussion, make your expectations, give us your opinion. Don't just answer, please give us your opinion. If you have a comment, we can receive any email. You have email, you can email us to CQM@dallascounty.org. We create that email for that reason. And the duration, please give it the time, give it your opinion on the duration of this training is still good for you. And do you need more time to express your opinion? You have wanted to. And the content, important content. You learn something. It is important to know that we need to bring more elements into that or dig deeper into the element that we already shared with you guys. All right.
All right, so let's just share these results. There we go. All right, everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. It's always great. I love these calls. It's a great way to start off the week, and I hope that you have a great rest of the day and that you have a great rest of the week. And we'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.